Good evening, students. Welcome to our final of our 6 flipped classroom lectures as we finish up our public policy unit before the AP exam. Today's lecture is on education policy, but instead of focusing on the United States as a whole, we're going to focus in on Chicago because there's lots of interesting stuff going on here. So, quick outline of where we're going to be going. We're going to talk through some very basic statistics about Chicago public schools, just so we understand the scope of what we're talking about. Talk through 2 key philosophies, understanding some thinking behind the current system. Charter and non-selective schools just go more in depth to clarify the difference between the two. And they go into some statistics, results, and the different types of schools, and funding options. And then we'll end with a resolution as always. Here we go. So, basic stats about Chicago public schools. First, CPS, that's how I'll refer to it from here on out. CPS is responsible for the education of all students living in the city of Chicago. The city of Chicago is one giant school district, and Chicago Public Schools is the organization that operates the school district in Chicago. There are over 404,000 students in the Chicago public school system. That's the 3rd largest school district in the United States, the other 2 being New York and Los Angeles. It's 404,000 students. Most cities in the United States barely have anywhere close to that many people, let alone school-age students. The budget for Chicago Public Schools in the coming year is approximate, hard to get exact numbers right now, but approximately $5.7 billion. I did not mean to say million. $5.7 billion is the amount of money that we expect it's going to take to educate those 404,000 students. There are 681 schools this year, so that's the 2012-2013 school year. There are 681 schools, that's including elementary, middle, and high schools. And then there are 3 types of schools. I'm going to focus in on high schools right now. So there's 3 types of high schools. There's selective, so that's your Walter Payton, your King College Prep, your Northside College Prep. Selective high schools. There are non-selective high schools, so the non-selective high schools near us are Hirsch, Hyde Park, and CVS, Simeon, you know them. And then there are charter schools, which is what Noble Street is. It's right there on your polo, Noble Street Charter School. Gary Comer College Prep is one school within the Noble Street charter. So, 2 key philosophies in understanding the current thinking about public schooling. First, public schooling. Where did this idea come from? This has not always been the case. You've heard me say that before in class. Public schooling has not always been part of the American landscape, but it has been for well over 150 years now. So, socializing the young. Remember, most of you have answered this question by now in the review packet. Socializing the young we see as one of the basic functions of government. Best way to socialize young? Well, let's send them to school for 8 hours a day and teach them basic things they need to know to be great citizens in our country, because they're going to be the ones running the country in the future. I'd also want you to recall the concept in America of equality. And when we say equality in America, we mean equal opportunity. If we truly believe in equal opportunity, giving everybody equal opportunity, well, we better give them an education to start their lives. So, an equal education so that they have equal opportunity when they graduate from that basic level of schooling. So, keep the playing field even. An economic reason for public schooling. So, yes, it's all well and good. Yay, we need to socialize the young. Make sure that our young people are great because they're going to run the country one day. Economic reasons go into the down to the money, right? Corporations and we as adults want you all to be well educated so that when you are running things or you get jobs that you are more productive. The economy will function at a higher level because we'll have even smarter, better trained in terms of thinking, communicating, problem solving, better trained citizens to make the economy work better. School choice is an even more specific way about thinking about this concept of public schooling. So, so we're going to start with this assumption. All children have a right to an education that will prepare them for successful lives. Right? Equal opportunity. All right, we all believe that. All children have the right to an education that will prepare them for successful lives. Unfortunately, fact, you can look across the country. All public schools are not preparing all students for successful lives. Right? You can cut it differently based on race, based on economic level, based on beginning abilities, based on gender. All public schools are not preparing all students for successful lives. And also, unfortunately, a very large number of those schools are falling very short of the goals of public education. The goal of giving everyone an equal opportunity and fully socializing citizens so that they can become productive adult citizens. A very large number of schools are falling very short of that goal. So, if we have people falling short of that goal, if there's an unequal distribution of quality schools, all right, every school is not perfect, families should have the right to choose, right? Life, liberty, and that pursuit of happiness. Families should have the right to choose a school they believe will best educate their child. They've been promised the chance of equal opportunity. That's part of the American promise. And families have the choice to choose which one they think will best deliver that for their child. Charter schools offer a choice to all families, not just the wealthy. Wealthy families can choose to say, I don't think this school is good enough. I'm going to choose to move to a school district that has higher quality schools. Oftentimes, housing in that school district will be more expensive. Or, I don't feel like moving, but there's a private school down the street, and I can shell out $15,000 a year for my son to go to 5th grade. Charter schools, as we'll talk about in just a second, offer an alternative to all families and a choice in schools to all families. So, let's break down the differences between charter and non-selective schools. Many of you know this already, but I just want to make sure we are all on the same page. So, charter schools. Difference between charter schools and non-selective schools, the main difference is autonomy and accountability. So a charter, as in a legal charter, is a document, right, that charters Noble Street College Prep, right? That charter gives the school autonomy to choose how to do each of these things below, right? They decide how exactly each of these is going to work, but they are also held to a more stricter accountability. They need to perform, right? Noble Street has to perform well, otherwise its charter, right, its license to operate as a school can be revoked by the state or the Chicago School Board. So, just to go in depth more quickly, charter schools have the autonomy to choose our discipline structure. You know very well that our discipline structure is very intentional about why it is what it is, and it's also very different than other schools. We also know that we have a very different school day in terms of length and also number of school days in a year. We also get to choose our curriculum. What are we going to teach you? How are we going to teach it to you? How much time are you going to spend in math class? Remember back to freshman year, or think about those freshmen right now. They have math 5 times over a 2-day, the AB day cycle. 5 math classes. Also, we've decided that all of you are going to take AP Government and Politics because we think that's what's going to best prepare you for life as a voting adult, as well as prepare you for success in those college classes next year. That's a decision we made. We were able to decide that. Mr. Troupis and Mr. Milky are able to decide exactly how they are going to hire people. They're not constrained by whether or not they're union. They are also not constrained completely by whether or not they are certified. We have to have a certain number of teachers, percent of teachers that are certified in Illinois, but Mr. Troupis has the ability to, if he finds a really great teacher that is working in St. Louis, but wants them to come work at his school, maybe be the founding math teacher, he can hire her. I'm talking about Miss Cooley, even though she's not currently, or when she was hired, not currently certified in Illinois. He could hire her and she could begin teaching. Also, the school has the ability to decide how exactly it spends the money it is given. Non-selective schools, those things I just ran through for a charter school, are much more decided centrally. All right? There's a central office for CPS where they make many of these decisions. Principals still have some choice, but a lot more is dictated from the central office. And also accountability is a lot different structure. It's much more difficult to completely close down a school that is non-selective, so a traditional public school. I want to highlight that both Right? I want to highlight that both are public, which means they do not cost you anything to attend. There's no tuition. And also, both are open to any student in Chicago. Right? You fill out an application, but that application doesn't decide whether or not you're admitted. That application is to give us the basic information so we know where to find you to tell you, hey, welcome to Gary Comer College Prep. You'll need to show up on these days to get started. I want us to move back to the concept of school choice right now. So there are a wide range of options in the CPS system, and they all have varying levels of results. So I want you to look at this graph quickly. Look at the x-axis, the y-axis. It's not independent and dependent variables. It's just plotting two different data points about schools. The bottom one is the average ACT score, and the y-axis is EPA's percent of students making expected gains. So what percent of students are growing each year? All schools take the pre and post tests on EPA, so the Explorer, the Plan, the ACT. Are students growing at the rate they should be growing? So you can see that there's a wide range of options. Up here, I'll do this in red, all right? So you could argue that these are the top schools, right? Super high ACT scores, very high percentage of students making their expected gains, all right? That's Walter Payton, Northside College Prep, Whitney Young. Actually, Northside College Prep is off the chart. It's over here. I zoomed in a little bit. All right, those three schools. All right. Also, I'm not going to draw this because we're going to have multiple slides, but note the color coding of this. Blue circles are selective enrollment high schools. Yellow circles are non-selective public high schools, and the green circles are charter schools. Again, the point I want you to get from this is that there's a wide range of options. Those options change, though, when you begin to narrow down what type of students are attending each school. So, let's look at another chart. All right, so what I've done here is I have only plotted the schools that have at least 75% of the students on free or reduced lunch. Right? So I'll write that up here for you. This chart is 75% of the school must be on free or reduced lunch. Okay. That's a commonly used measure by what percentage of the school is at or near the poverty line. So right now, this graph is showing us which schools are only showing us the schools that serve predominantly the poor communities of Chicago. Okay. So again, there's a wide range of schools. There's selective enrollment schools that are still serving a large number of poor students, but there's still a very large cluster down here of schools. All right. We lost some schools over here, but there's still a very large cluster of schools that are performing well below the Chicago public school average. And notice that the average ACT is only a 17 for Chicago public schools. That huge chunk is serving below the average. There are a crop of green circles up here. I bet you can guess what schools those are. We're going to zoom in to a slightly different set of schools. Right? So I've rearranged the scatter plot, and the data that is being presented here is only schools, so not talking about income anymore, but a school to appear on this plot must have at least 75% African American students. Okay, 75% of the students are black to be on this graph. And there must be at least 10% of the school is has an IEP, so 10% of the school is involved in special education in some way. Okay. That's essentially slightly below the average for CPS. So it needs to be an average CPS school that is taking the full range of students, all students. 75% black and at least 10% special ed. Now look at the options. There's that one lone dot up there. Who do you think that is? That's us. All right. This data does not include Johnson College Prep because they haven't their ACT scores hadn't been published. The first time they took the ACT officially was last week. Okay. Scary thing here. The options are overwhelmingly not good if you live in a neighborhood that is majority black. So, stats and funding. So, sources of funding for Chicago Public Schools, just so we can make sure we wrap our head around where is this money coming from. As we've said before, education has become a very good example of federalism. Originally, it was left completely to the states, but that's not the case anymore. Some money comes from the federal government, some money comes from the state government, a very large chunk of money comes from the state government, and also a large chunk of money comes from local taxes. Right? However, how funding works is the federal government does not send a check to Noble or does not send a check to Gary Comer College Prep and say, hey, here's your chunk of money for the year. No, they send large chunks of money to the school district, and it's the school district that decides how that money will be allocated to each school within its district. So all the federal money, state money, and local money from Chicago goes to CPS, and the Chicago Public School System that decides how they're going to allocate the money they have, the big pot of money they have, to each of the schools. So funding per student is not equal between non-selective schools, so those yellow dots that you saw, and the green dots. That is not equal. Non-selective schools in CPS get approximately $13,000 a year per student. Charter schools, however, get close to $8,600 per student. I'll write that up here for you. So a charter school gets approximately $8,600 per student from CPS. Noble is able to close that gap partially with money that we've raised from generous donors, and also money that we've received from grants such as from Bill Gates' foundation that we've sought out. But CPS does not give money equally to non-selective CPS schools and charter schools. And to make things interesting, just like the federal government, just like the state of Illinois, just like the city of Chicago, Chicago Public Schools has a budget deficit. Right? Previous slide, we talked about how it spends billions of dollars every year educating the children of Chicago. Well, it's expected that this coming year, CPS will have a budget deficit of, so it will be operating in the red, approximately somewhere between $600 and $700 million. Right? So this year, CPS has a budget deficit, right, between $600 and $7 million. We've come to our resolution that we are going to be debating in class. In order to reward the success of Noble, look back to those scatter plots, right? The green circles that were doing well above the other schools. To reward the success of Noble, Chicago Public Schools will increase all Noble schools per pupil funding by $2,000. Begin thinking about your reasons why, yes, that is a good idea. Begin thinking about reasons why that is not a smart idea. Don't forget about the philosophies around school choice, creating equal opportunity for students. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed our flipped classroom lectures, because this is the end.